Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Henry SSALI, and this is the State of the Nation. Before I start, as always, you always know that I start with the land acknowledgement. So, with that in mind, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. It's a pleasure to have each and every one of you. Thank you so much for joining us. The discussion today is going to be interesting. So bear with us for a moment. Shall join you shortly.
This is the State of the Nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The State of the Nation with Henry SSALI.
This is the State of the Nation. My name is Henry SSALI. Before we start today's conversation, there's one item that I want to touch base on. This is a discussion that we shall be expounding on in the next couple of days, specifically next weekend, the issue of land reforms. First on the agenda for the Prime Minister recently was land reforms. But we all know land is a fixed asset. And when you talk about land reforms, in Uganda, that is centered on Milo land. The Milo land issue, however, is a Buganda issue. So I have a couple of questions that we shall be engaging with next Sunday. Why should the land question be centered mainly on Buganda's context? Is it time for Ugandans to engage in the topic of federalism? This is an important question to interrogate. Some of you might ask why. The rationale is easy, especially today. In today's context, where in the most recent elections, Buganda overwhelmingly voted against President Museveni. He has no legitimacy in Buganda. He should therefore not be the one initiating reforms in Buganda. Buganda issues should be resolved by the Buganda government and the people of Buganda, whether they are immigrants or natives. These are serious issues, and they must be handled very carefully. The question is, can the government fairly engage in these discussions? President Museveni might be presiding over the government of Uganda, but he has no authority in Buganda. The Buganda issues must be engaged with by the Buganda government, the Bataka of Buganda, and the people of Buganda. This is not rhetoric. These are serious discussions. And we shall be engaging in this discussion mainly next Sunday, which we are going to dedicate on land reform discussions. My name is Henry SSALI. This is the State of the nation. Going into today's discussion, of course, the counterfeit pandemic is apparent in Uganda. There are many fakes all over, whether it is forging medications or counterfeiting cement, or imitating or making academic forgeries, and indeed sham elections. This is a topic that has been swept under the rug for so many times. But that time is over. We do have a special guest that will be joining us today, one who is an expert in consumer protection. He will be introducing himself. You probably did not see him on the flyer or graphic or poster that was advertised earlier. That was a deliberate decision to ensure that he's able to join us without any interruptions by authorities or any government entities. We are excited to have them join us today. They will be introducing themselves shortly. But first, let me invite my colleague, Mr. Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali. Mr. Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali, it's a pleasure to have you join us today.
A very good pleasure, Henry, as usual. Salute to all people who are following us across the globe, especially those who are based in Kampala, Uganda, where these conversations are possibly much more relevant than anywhere else, you know, from the rest of the perspectives that are part of these conversations. Welcome to the show. Julius Mitala is my name. As by the screen, Mitala Muzukulu wa Mswangali, in recognition of my grandfather, the man who raised me and possibly made me who I am. I am here as usual to give my 5 cents, you know, into some of the pertinent issues that are currently trending in motherland Uganda, and see how we can exchange ideas and views and, you know, take our motherland forward. By way of profession, I'm a trained lawyer based in the UK, been here for a couple of years. But I am an identity Ugandan supporter and very interested in all issues that relate to the place where I was born. I think, you know, for me, I'm one of those people who describe themselves as having one head here, one leg standing here, and another leg standing, you know, in motherland Uganda. That's where my heart beats from. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope it's going to be another interesting exchange. Greetings to Dr. Stella. Nice to see you. I was beginning to panic. I thought you had been kidnapped. Back to you, Henry. Thank you very much.
Dr. Stella is always here to educate us as an educator, researcher, and of course, political activist. She's always here to educate us. Pleasure to have you, Dr. Stella. Who are you and why are you here today?
Thank you very much, Henry. It's a pleasure to be with you all. Muzukulu wa Mitala nkulamusiza. Muzukulu wa Muswangali banenge bademmenye kulamusiza sebo. I want to thank you, Henry SSALI, for creating this platform for us. As a Ugandan who's been away from home for the last 1 month, it's a great delight to join you guys every weekend and talk a little bit about home. My name is Stella Nyanzi. I am a politician belonging to Forum for Democratic Change. I am an anthropologist with a PhD in human sexualities. I am a poetess. I'm a Facebooker. I'm a human being very much interested in Uganda and the questions of being a Ugandan. And so, Henry, I thank you so much for this platform, the State of the Nation.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Dr. Stella Nyanzi. We do have a surprise guest, Mr. Chimela Henry. He's going to introduce himself. Mr. Chimela, are you with us?
Yes, I am. And I would say good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Pleasure to have you. I know you're joining us from Kampala, and you are specifically joining us.
And those who might doze off as we chat. Sorry?
I know you're joining us from Kampala, and we know that the internet might be disturbing you a little bit, but we are excited to have you to join us in regard to the conversation that pertains to fakes, counterfeits, imitations, all those things, whichever name you want to make it. But before we dive into the conversation, what's your bio? Why are you the most qualified voice to participate in this conversation?
I would say that I'm a consumer activist. I've been advocating on consumer issues for more than 30 years. And I do consumer advocacy in Uganda. I have been part of the consumer movement in Uganda since 1993. But even before I joined the consumer movement, what I was doing in community would fall in line with what I am doing currently. I headed Uganda Consumer Protection Association, and thereafter I started Consumer Education Trust, now running a consumer center. It's called Global Consumer Center. And with regards to the subject matter today, I do advocate and sit and also develop standards and also join other institutions to bring about consumer protection. Where I would say that I'm part of the National Bureau of Standards, where I take in the consumer voice, the Communications Commission to see to it that consumer rights are taken on board. In the financial sector, worked on the financial consumer protection guidelines with other consumer and other stakeholders. And in other sectors in agriculture, I am in there, and I work very closely with likely-minded civil society organizations and individuals. So I'm honored to be here, Henry, Julius, and Dr. Stella. It's nice to join you on the stream this evening. So I look forward to the discussions, and I will be adding into my voice, given my experience in the consumer advocacy that I've done for quite some time now, starting as a youth. And I recall Julius, when he was home, Julius used to be a foot soldier on consumer issues, where he would go out in the community to ask consumers and administer some of our Gallup surveys and so forth. So Julius passed through my hands too. And it is an honor when he asked me to join in and see how best I can add to the discussion this evening or morning or afternoon, wherever the global world the followers are. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to the discussions.
Again, thank you so much for joining us. As we dive into this conversation, since you have intimated about the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, I'm going to play a video, and before either Stella or Julius respond to that conversation, I want you to tell us what you think. What are your thoughts being an activist who has been looking out for the consumer, a consumer yourself, and an advocate for the consumers? What your thoughts are on this, and why this still continues since you guys have been around for some years now, particularly in your position since 1993.
Police in Tororo, working on the tip off from the community, has burst a racket that has been making counterfeit cement and selling to unsuspecting customers. This was at the home of a one only identified as Owor, who is now at large. Here, heaps of cement like sand, dust and aggregate stones was found. The search began and tons of fake cement were found packed ready for sale inside these grass-thatched houses. This is in addition to the thousands of packing bags belonging to different cement factories from within the district. According to the whistleblower, he was tipped by locals about the fake cement.
I had a communication from one of my people, I lead them in the community. They said, Chairman, there is a big vehicle at the home of Samson Opio. Uganda say, what is that vehicle for? When I went there, I saw a vehicle with this fake cement.
2 weeks ago, I refused this kind of cement. When I was mixing, I found it was not the real cement. And I returned that cement to the shop where I bought from.
But the illegal act is not only affecting the locals. The surrounding cement factory heads in the district say this has negatively impacted on their sales.
Now they are mixing some foreign material inside the bag along with the cement, okay, which has similar color. Now, when the customer uses, he finds the quality is not what Simba was used to produce.
Security says one suspect is already in their custody to answer for the criminal act.
We arrested one person who is with us. They were repackaging this cement. Indeed, they are what we call adulteration. And this issue, you see what is happening in the country. Very many houses are collapsing. Very many upstairs are collapsing as a result of this.
Police later loaded the fake cement and took it to the Tororo Central Police Station for further investigations. Linda Ndumngami, David Ocheng, NBS, Live at 9.
Of course, this video was adapted from the NBS news channel, and we are sharing it from them. So that's a reference to NBS. We thank you for the job that you do. Mr. Chimela, this is about cement. Tororo, of course, has always been known as the hub of cement. If we have started getting fake cement from Tororo, the main hub of cement, what should consumers think about the next generation of builders or architectures? Should we be comfortable with the buildings that are being constructed using this cement? But remember, this is not just about cement. Most previously, there were counterfeits for COVID or Covitex, but there were also counterfeits for vaccines. People were injected with water, which was faked and sold to companies. So this idea of counterfeiting products in Uganda has become a habit that needs to be looked into. What are you guys that are looking out for the consumer? What have you done to reduce these counterfeits?
Thank you very much, Henry. You have said that it has started. I would say it has not started. It is as old as Uganda, and it is on the increase. I started advocating, but there is a time I told people and they didn't want to hear it. Some quality procurement, I said, might have ended with certain decades ago. I'm going to just give a general and then I will zero it down to one aspect. Let me start with the consumer dilemma and the country dilemma. And I'll start it in such a manner that will give you a broad picture. The executive is in business. The legislature is in business. The judiciary is in business. The regulators are in business. Business is in business. Who is there to protect the consumer? I would say the consumer, which is the largest socioeconomic grouping in the country, and that is the blood, heart, and fuel of business, is not taken care of and listened to. Institutions, ministries, agencies, and departments that are supposed to protect the consumers get the least budget to implement their obligations as duty bearers. And consumers as right holders are left at the mercy of the defrauders. So what we have just watched in that clip, in some people's ears and eyes, it is new, but to me, it is very old. These are issues that we table and raise every day. How to fight counterfeits, fake, substandard, and unscrupulous practices. Quality culture in Uganda is a myth. People just think of earning money without taking care of the citizens who are the right holders, and the duty bearers are not taking onto their responsibility. Is the aspect of protecting consumers in Uganda is wanting. I might sound political, but the very words I'm using hold water. I will give you a genesis of a number of things. As a consumer advocate and a consumer organization, we drafted a consumer protection law way back in 1999. Until to date, we are still advocating for the consumer protection bill to be enacted into law to protect the consumers. With desperation of not succeeding in many things, we have switched our campaign to say that the existing laws, in whatever form they are, let them be obsolete, should be implemented to the letter. In the meantime, those could protect the consumers. The biggest challenge in Uganda is the budgets that will bring in enforcement agencies to do monitoring, surveillance, investigations, have very minimal, that they cannot allow the employment of enough human resource and also having financial resources to carry out such investigations. You'll find that whatever subject matter you bring on board, you'll find that the ministry, department, and agency that is supposed to safeguard consumers is affected. I'll give you an initiative which we are involved in. There is the Anti-Counterfeit Network of Africa. We are part of it, and we campaign against counterfeiting, issues to do with substandards, and bringing more awareness. Every department needs to have just-in-time response. When consumers complain, then the duty-bearer institution should respond. But when you go to all the ministries, departments, and agencies that are supposed to do that, they have got limited human resource and limited resources to roll out and investigate. And this goes back to the statement I gave you. The executive is in business, the judiciary is in business, the regulators are in business. when you go deep down to check who are behind some of these counterfeiting, substandard, and fake initiatives, you'll find that they are fully employed duty bearers. And when they would be in position to carry out the enforcement and investigation, they will be stepping on each other's toes. I can share with you many other aspects. There is a time I had an opportunity to share with His Excellency the President. It was an initiative with regards to anti-counterfeit, and Linda Choker was the head of that initiative. And I told His Excellency, Uganda will never be competitive if we do not have a quality culture. And if Uganda is to develop and be successful, we'll need to fight counterfeit. The way you campaigned with regards to HIV/AIDS, counterfeiting, fake products, and substandard products are a cancer to the country called Uganda. So put in the same energy, pass the consumer protection law, put in place food safety law, and put the infrastructure in place. So what we have just watched is just a tip of the iceberg. You will find, and I would say one other statement I would like to say on the same is the cement is not from Tororo. The packaging is the one that is from Tororo. Because the businesses are also complaining. But if I would give you one story which I found in Lira so many years ago when I was doing consumer advocacy, there were people complaining about, because we found hardwares that were owned by the Africans or Ugandans had underweight cement. And those that were not owned by Ugandans had accurate cement. And the fellows were telling us, we are offloading this cement right from the factory. But we think there is connivancy to tarnish some of the local business people. That proved there was a circuit. All this is documented. So why am I telling you all this? To show you that the aspect of consumer protection needs to be taken as a priority. Ministries, departments, and agencies need to be given the requisite resources. The laws that we have in place need to be implemented, enforced, and even consumers to have platforms where they can lodge complaints, and consumer complaints are addressed just in time. So as briefly, irrespective of speaking for so many minutes, that is the little I could start with, and then I can come in and share more information as we continue our discussion. And I had forgotten to mention the meeting where it was, where I told His Excellency the President, and one of the members of Parliament currently, who was then the assistant to the President, we were at Protea Hotel in Kololo when I addressed that to him. It is on record. So as of now, I find that there is limited will to put enough resources to fight those vices that are affecting consumers, because the executives are in business, the judiciary are in business, legislators are in business, regulators are in business. They cannot shoot themselves in the foot That's where I will stop for now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Henry Kimela, for this very insightful submission. Dr. Stella, as an educationist, what comes to mind when you hear such words that quality culture in Uganda is a myth? As an educationist, what comes to mind? And someone who has been at Makerere University, the ivory tower of Uganda, what comes to your mind?
Right, so I want to appreciate the contributions of Mukulu Chimera Henry because he brings the perspective of consumers, and he's also speaking as an activist who has a lot of experience. I want to say that, you know, upfront, that for me, I'm delighted to learn that there is a community of activists working in the interest of protecting consumers. And I think part of what I'm going to do is to juxtapose my experience as a creator of knowledge. Okay, you have called me an educationist. I think that my heartbeat is more passionate as a researcher, as a creative creator, as a writer, as a poet, as a person who makes music, as a person whose works have been stolen. I cannot tell you the number of times my articles have been lifted without acknowledgement, without referencing, without giving my book or my Facebook post or my article or my production as the original genuine source. The number of times that my content has been taken, intellectual property has been stolen by professors, by students, by journalists, by the media, by activists, and shared as if it was created by these thieves. And so I want to enter the field not so much as a consumer, although indeed I have consumed and suffered from counterfeits in circulation, but I also want to speak as a creator of knowledge, because every product on the market has got an initiator, an originator, an inventor, a creator, okay? In the case of the film we saw, it was cement. I think for me that one of the things we must speak about is this absence of protection of those of us who create products in Uganda. I know that the Uganda Registration Services Bureau has been on a campaign for a while, maybe the last 5 years, to try and register those of us who produce things. And so people who have content that's packaged, that cement comes in a particular bag that has a logo, it has a particular color, it has the name of the industry. And what happens with the perfection of the fraudulent industry, the perfection of those who make fake products, is that very quickly they create an economy, an industry of very knowledgeable Ugandans who are unemployed but are very skilled, and they learn graphics and software, and they get skills to reproduce packaging such that an imitation will look almost exactly, if not better, than a replica. And we call this dupe, duplicating things. It has become the order of the day. We have a whole industry on Nasa Road. On Nasa Road, we can find an MP contestant going with my certificates, my transcripts from University of London. I have a PhD. I went to Gayaza High School. I passed highly for my O-levels and my A-levels and my primary. I went to Makerere University. I got a superb degree. I went to the University of London. So all my certificates can be stolen out of my bag. And the counterfeit industry has perfected the trade of reproducing my certificates and the certificates of other excellent Ugandans who do the hard work. They will reproduce these certificates, and my old genuine copies will look like they are the counterfeits, right? And what has happened is that therefore genuine materials are very soon losing their value because no one is protecting them. Lazy but wealthy or creative, streetwise people can steal ideas and get them reproduced en masse and sold out to any willing buyers, and there's no protection of those of us who create knowledge. So I've spoken about intellectual property, the lack of copyright. Issues around copyright protection have been ongoing in Uganda for a long time. The music industry, the filmmaking industry, creatives are suffering a lot because we lack we lack a copyright law that is strict, but also the issue of enforcement that Mukulu Chimera talked about is important, because even if there's a law, even if there's a national legal framework and policy framework that protects, talked about is important, because even if someone is speaking above me and I can hear the person. Okay, now you've gone. So I'll continue. But what I'm saying is that there is a lack of protection and enforcement of poorly drafted laws or laws that don't cover us well enough is lacking. And maybe the third thing I want to talk about is the absence of a conscience, of a national conscience that realizes that counterfeits, fakes, bichupuri, biwanyi, that those things are criminal, that they are wrong, that it is immoral and unethical to reproduce and enjoy and consume these things. Ugandans have normalized the stealing of ideas. Ugandans have normalized, to a large extent, the duplication of what shouldn't be duplicated. And it is interesting that COVID-19 negative post results were being, someone could fake a negative COVID result after they had tested positive, and these people are flying in and out of the country depending on what they wanted to do. The issue around vaccines is important, and I think for me that while buildings and cement and other externally utilized products are important to highlight, I think for me one of the gravest dangers is the impact of counterfeits on products which we ingest, we eat and we drink and we take, and sometimes they're injected into us. And so food and drink are important. There's a time when Uganda Waraji was being duplicated. There's a time when Kasese was being duplicated. There's a time when food, sausages were being duplicated, and people were giving us a lot of rubbish in the name of sausages. Medicine, so food and drink, but I think medicines for me are also really important, because when people are seeking for treatment to improve their health and well-being, often the prescriptions given by doctors are mandatory, and a person whose life is in danger, a person whose life is not at its optimal or maximum point, will seek out for the medicine that has been prescribed. And so to sell fake medicine, to an unhealthy Ugandan, to a person on their deathbed, is criminal. It's not just criminal, it's pure evil. The idea that Ugandans have counterfeit medicines in pharmacies with seals of approval from Uganda Bureau of Standards as well as national medical stores and whoever else is scary. Who is looking out for the interests of everyday Ugandans who don't understand the English of counterfeit language? Who is looking out for the interest of the mother on the street who has to buy medicines for her child in hospital? Who is looking out for the average person who has to buy bunzali, curry powder to put in food? Who is looking out for our health and well-being? And so I think that these are important questions. The very last one I want perhaps to talk about is signatures, forging of signatures. It's very good we have a legal mind around. But I want to talk about wills. When your father dies, when your husband dies, as a woman, as a feminist, there's no way I cannot talk about this. That I have seen a will and final testament of a dead man being forged and signatures getting changed, and the normalization of this and supporting it in the name of male patriarchy, that men have to protect the property of their father. That is scary. So Henry, I know that we have opened up Pandora's box, but these are issues that we should be talking about, if not to open the conversation so Ugandans can be more aware. It's good we have learned the problem has been on for a long time, that we can begin initiating thinkers and igniting other people to talk about the issue. Thank you very much. For now, I'll stop here.
Mitala Muzukuru wa Muswangali, your thoughts in response?
Oh my goodness. I tell you what, Henry, I think today, out of all the shows that we've done here, I think this is one of the most pertinent shows that we possibly had. And I'm very excited and pleased to have Mr. Henry Chimera here on the panel today, giving us such a brilliant insight into issues that affect consumer advocacy in Uganda. I got involved with a little bit with consumer advocacy in Uganda around 1999, 2000, and 2001 there, in my earlier days at university as a young law student. And I think I spent quite some time in the mentorship of Mr. Chimera at the Uganda Consumer Protection Association. And I had, first-hand experience of, coming into contact with how these sorts of things affect, an average common Ugandan. We are dealing with things like that. I remember that time, some of the commonest issues that we are dealing with were counterfeit drugs, Panadols, aspirins, malaria tablets, and stuff like that on the market. There were lots of issues around complaints about drinks, beers, sodas, and stuff like that. And these were people were willingly bringing in samples, because we used to do market surveys and people would bring in some of these things as their samples, because what I think the intention at that time was to try to create, a platform or a body which is, very robust and very capable of defending the rights of consumers in the country. But obviously, I think most of the things that have been raised, I can just simply agree with them. I think for me, the way I would look at this is that I think the government has kind of given up on its role, and even to say given up is to be kind on them. I think the government has deliberately decided to keep a blind eye to some of these practices where they know that they are actually happening. And the reason for this is because I think there is a decision that's got to be made between either promoting economic development and engaging in a fight against counterfeits and low standard products. So I think that's really where the problem is. So normally what you tend to find is that the approach, the government policy has been much more towards pushing, productivity, economic productivity, innovation, and stuff like that in that area. But while at the same time keeping a blind eye to the issues of counterfeits and these sorts of things that we have seen in the video here. To put it into perspective, this is what I would say. there is a litany of legislations, pieces of legislation that have been enacted through our Ugandan parliament, and I could just give you, a few of them here. There is the Communications Fair and Competitions Regulations 2005. There is the Uganda Communications Act 2013. There is the Uganda National Bureau of Standards Act. There is the Common Law of Contract and Torts. There is also the Sales of Goods Act. These are some of the legislations that exist on the Ugandan, legal library. But I think what is lacking, and Mr. Henry Chimera has already hinted on this, what is lacking is that comprehensive consumer protection law, which will overhaul all these litany of legislations that seem to be pulling in different directions. So I think that's where we really have a problem. And I think it's it is to be decried, really. You would wonder, if the government is really serious on these sorts of things, how can it possibly be justified that a draft bill for consumer protection was presented before the Minister of Technology or Minister of Trade, Industry, and I don't know what the actual title of the ministry is, but the draft was put to them in 2004, and it's never seen the day of the light until today. If you look back 2004 to where we are now, that's almost about 17 years down the road. And you wonder what sorts of people work in these offices that do not really have the interest of the common Ugandans, at heart. Because the sorts of things that we are seeing, they're kind of borderline economic terrorism, if somebody wants to put it like that, because there is no way you can expect, an economy to be growing, but growing on fakes. I think that undermines our credibility in the region and also globally. Because how are we going to be able to do trade, with our neighbors and other competitors in Kenya, in Tanzania, in South Africa? And I'm not saying these problems do not exist, from their end. But I mean, competitively, we are kind of undermining our own competitive advantage, because then everybody who thinks about doing trade with a country that has got such a bad record of consumer protection laws, I think they do get discouraged at that point in time. So the government should take an interest in this, and it is, and I think it's exciting also to learn that the advocacy groups have not given up on this. I hear Mr. Chimela is still very active in that sector. And I know colleagues that I used to work with back in the days, whom I'm pretty sure they are still very active on the ground and they are still pursuing these things. And we have a lot of goodwill, from non-government organizations. There's quite a number of them, the World Trade Organization, there's the Consumers International. There's a body a network of bodies that can be able to support, us in this kind of line. But one thing that I don't want to forget mentioning here, which is really, really problematic, is that we might blame all these people, all the different organizations, all the legislators, and so on and so forth. But there is an underlying problem, because the public seems to have accepted that, having low quality products on the market works more effectively for them. So basically, somebody will go to the market, will go to the shop, very knowing that the products that they are going to buy, they are counterfeit, or they are not legit, but they are willing to pay the price for that product, even when they know that the product that they are buying is not, what they should reasonably be buying. So we have that problem, and I think this is where the issue of changing the mindset, comes into play here. And I think it's got to be a coordinated kind of activity across all stakeholders, from parliament, from the civil society organizations, from advertisers, from the manufacturers themselves. They should really take an interest in these sorts of things, because obviously, if somebody fakes your brand, the damage it does to you is unimaginable. And I would be surprised if, obviously, in the clip we've seen a representative from Tororo factory, stepping in and decrying, what they had discovered. But I think manufacturers overall should really take an interest in these sorts of things. But core to that, we need to remember that a consumer needs to be given sufficient protection. The law gives the consumer, a number of rights. These include, the right to safety, right to information, the right to choose, the right to be heard. We talk about here, complaint procedures. If an organization sells you something that is substandard or something that's fake, where do you level that complaint to? The right to get redress, the right for consumer education, the right for a healthy environment, the right for basic needs. These kind of issues are all provided for, in the laws, and actually the draft legislation that was referred to there, caters for all these things: rights and information and remedies against counterfeits and deceptive, price banding, by sellers and suppliers. It talks about the small claims court to be able to provide redress, an arbitration kind of dispute resolution, program to be able to address those kind of things. And I think it's a wonderful piece of draft legislation, and it's just really disappointing that those who are responsible for carrying forward this kind of reform do not take it that seriously. But so, one of the other things that I want to bring in at this point in time is that
they write that down, and because I wanna hear what Mr. Chimera has to say. What role, Mr. Chimera, what role should consumers play in keeping the Uganda National Bureau of Standards efficient in doing their job? Mr. Chimera, are you with us?
Yes, please, I am. The consumers have a role to play, like where there are rights, there are responsibilities. Consumers have a responsibility to be critically aware when they go onto the market. And if they see anything wrong, they should report. 2, consumers have a responsibility to take action. That one action is to report when they see something bad on the market. The other aspect is consumers also have a responsibility towards sustainable consumption and facilitate sustainable production. But all that said, consumers are not specialists. I'll give Julius, like his grandfather would not be in a position to know that this is a quality medicine that he will need to buy for his ailment, irrespective of it to being cheap or expensive. The duty consumers and the responsibilities have are facilitated by the duty bearers, who are obligated to allow quality goods and services onto the market. If the obligated duty bearers do their duty, consumers will also play their role by reporting. I'll give you an example. We lodge many complaints, and unfortunately, the complaints are not addressed. There are many whistleblower consumers who see things on the market and they report. But these very institutions that are obligated to protect them do not respond. And this goes back to what I started with. As they start investigating, they find that Minister X, General X, Brother X, Sister X is the owner of the business. When they investigate, they find Honorable X, wife to the Judge X, or husband to Judge X owns the business. Regulator X owns the business. Then they end up not responding to consumer issues. That is how consumers have ended up being complacent. Consumers end up saying, where will I report? I will give you one case where we had a complaint on soft drinks. We went to court on behalf of the consumers. For 2 years, we were going to court. We were not summoned, and we didn't know when the judgment was done, but we saw court bailiffs coming in to pick furniture from our office that we had lost the case and we had failed to appear in court. But for 2 years, we were going to court religiously. There is a time, another case that I wish to share, when I took samples for testing. The results, instead of being given to me, were given to the person I was complaining about. So this is where you find that the consumers are in the dilemma. I would use the case where Dr. Stella said counterfeit or forged wills are used and the innocent are victimized. In whatever we are discussing here, consumers are the victims. The duty bearers have not played their role. You wouldn't tell me that I have not taken my responsibility to report that I was injected water instead of a COVID vaccine. The consumers went there knowing that the vaccines were genuine, were cleared by the obligated institution. This is where I have put that we are in a supplier-driven market where consumers trust that whatever is brought on the market has been tested, which is not the fact. Further, consumers find either no alternative or very few alternatives. So consumers end up picking what is on the market. The onus remains on whoever is elected as a head of state with the team he or she serves with and under the Constitution to protect the lives of Ugandans, all consumers in Uganda. One other thing that is very key is to raise consumer awareness, not once, but continuously, and put there infrastructure, departments, agencies that will respond to every consumer complaint in time. Consumers are not, majority of consumers, my grandmother, my sister, my brother, my children who are in urban and rural areas, who are not competent technicians or personnel to test the medicine, to test the quality of food, to test the quality of oil, fuel. We are all, even professionals are victimized. The obligation goes back to number one duty bearer, the government of Uganda, has to make sure whatever is put on the market is of good quality. Mainstreaming quality culture in whatever we are doing as a nation, not only in goods and services. We need to have quality culture in the policies we develop. We need to have quality culture in the budgets that we develop. We need to have quality culture in the enforcement. This is life of Ugandans. So the burden goes back to the duty bearers. The right holders have put trust in the duty bearers and they are let down by the duty bearers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chimera, for that submission. Dr. Stella, having heard what Mr. Chimera has intimated upon, combined with what Council Mitala said earlier, and also remembering some of the conversations that Mr. Chimera, of course, intimated earlier, that he had a conversation with the person of the president of Uganda, and he told him that Uganda will never be competitive, locally or internationally, if the issue of quality culture is not taken as a priority. As a creator yourself, what do you think the role of the National Bureau of Standards should be in enforcing quality culture in Uganda?
Right. So, Henry, I want to first of all talk about government because Mr. Chimera Henry said that at the end of the day, the buck falls on the government of Uganda, right? I think that when we talk about quality, what is the quality of our government, right? When we talk about, let's talk about leadership. I mean, one of the things I talk about all the time with a lot of pain is the leadership crisis that we have in Uganda. I think one of the things that the consumer activist rightly talked about, which also was echoed by the lawyer, is the issue of parliament and legislature and having good laws, and the state of having a bill for over 10 years, over a decade, a bill that has not been enacted by parliament. And so I think because the legislature, because our legislators, because parliament is among the arms of government, I want to start there before I even go to the National Bureau of Standards. And again, ekyennyanja kisooka kududa mutwe, right? Bwekiba kiduza omutwe kijja kududa kyonna. A fish begins getting rotten from its head. Very simple metaphor, but quite powerful. I think for me that our parliament is really sick. Our parliament are among the culprits. I think one of the things that Mukulu Chimera said was that legislature is in business. In the counterfeit business, we also have lawmakers, law enforcers there. No wonder they cannot pass the bill. The executive is in business. No wonder Museveni thinks, these things of having a culture of quality or a quality culture are a dream, an illusion. They cannot be achievable for Ugandans. These are the leaders that we have. But I want to talk about an issue that was quite hot during the election season when parliamentarians, both existent and those who wanted to enter, were caught with fake papers, okay? So the normalization, it is normal in Uganda to procure, to distribute, to circulate, to own, and to show off counterfeits. This is done by our leaders, okay? I mean, let's pause for a minute. Before we talk about the law that wants to check counterfeit production and circulation, those who are going to create this law are dealing, they are the experts, okay? How are they going to stop it? How will they stop that from which they have benefited? How will Mukulu Sejirinya raise his hand in support of a bill, in support of enacting that bill? How will Sejirinya and those such as him who might have papers reproduced to seem genuine at Nasser Road? And I'm using Mukulu Sejirinya advisedly. I have never seen his papers. I have nothing personal against him, but I like to use him because he's an easy target. We all know his story. Those are the leaders we have in Uganda who are going to oversee the work of the National Bureau of Standards. How do we guarantee that the staff members of the National Bureau of Standards are not as rotten as the rest of the head we have seen? And so I think for me that as a country, we have fallen far from grace, so far from grace. I know that a number of times when, you know, UNBS has been asked about their stamp of approval, UNBS, you find it on all sorts of fake products. I mean, I have, my father had I'm going to end with this story, Henry. I know it's, you know, I've overshot my time, but my father had a little radio, a Sony radio. He put Tiger head batteries in it. And Daddy walked everywhere with his Sony radio and his Tiger head batteries. I think they were ever ready or something like that. They were red batteries with, I think they were Tiger head because they had a tiger on them. And these batteries would go about a month, and his Sony radio was perfect. He had it, I think, every time I remembered him. And when he died, I wanted to inherit it, but someone took it ahead of me. Now, I wanted to buy a replica of Sunny, and I went to Chikubu. There is Sunny with S-A-N-I. There is Sun, so Sunny is S-O-N-Y, Sony, I think it's Sony. There's Sunny with S-O-N-N-Y. There's Sunny with Z-S-O-N-Y. There's Sunny with Sunny. There are all sorts of Sony radios, and they look exactly like Daddy's radio. Even Tiger batteries. There are all sorts of Tiger batteries on the market, and some of them have the UNBS, Uganda National Bureau of Standard, that stamp they put, the paper they put on. Sometimes it's a stamp. So our country is sick. Our leaders are sick. Uganda National Bureau of Standards are sick. Before I can even go to the institutions, which institutions have been corrupted by a corrupt executive, a corrupt legislature, and corrupt judge. I have talked about the judicial organ almost every time that we go to court. I mean, Mukuru Chimera told us about going to court with cases, and they had to wait and wait and wait and wait. Meanwhile, what happened? You're still consuming Fansida. I don't know if you remember the Fansida scandal where people were taking fake Fansida tablets. And so, do we blame the institutions? Do we blame? I think Museveni must go. Museveni and his system must go. Museveni and his institutions must go. Now the consumer activist, me, I'm a civil and political rights activist. We need a major overhaul in the system. We can't talk about counterfeits when Museveni's democracy is a counterfeit. Museveni is a counterfeit president. We have presidents, yet Museveni president was Chupuli again. But what as a Uganda, if we want to correct Uganda, we have to have a major overhaul of our leadership. Museveni is a fake, his army is a fake, his wife is a fake, his institutions are fake, the legislature is a fake, the constitution is a fake, the judiciary is a fake, Ugandans are fake, and fakeness has been normalized. So we need to rejuvenate our entire selves as Uganda. Fenna twelongose, nanga nelongose nejjamu oba fake oba counterfeit. Kubanga pirated DVDs in Nyumira. Ate they're in Kampala, there are so many pirated DVDs, right? So pirated perfume. I spray Gucci on myself. Is it Gucci? Saw it on the streets of Kampala? I don't think so. I like to wear Prada once in a while. So Henry, as I finish, I think it's not just UNBS. If it's a Bureau of Standards, the standards of the entirety of our country are so low. We have sunk so low. No wonder what baby so byamazi bitubeerawo.
Mr. Mitala Muzukulu wa Muswangali, the legal mind on this panel. Your thoughts on the submissions from Mr. Chimera and, of course, Dr. Nyanzi.
I've shared something in the chat room there where I'm referencing at that time, I think, I don't know whether he still is, but at that time, this was the UNBS, executive director, Deus Mubangizi, who once arrested a trader with 260 cartons of expired beef, and the trader was fined a mere 3,000, 3,000 Ugandan shillings, less by, just about $1, So this is how ridiculous things can be, really. I mean, in that kind of environment, really, I'm lost for words because I cannot think of, the best descriptive, character that I can use to describe that kind of situation. But I agree entirely. There is a problem. Although I really want to bring out a few issues. There has been some research that has been conducted in Uganda that tells quite a lot, about how ordinary people feel about some of these organizations. So obviously, when Mr. Chimera says that the consumer has been failed at all levels, I think these statistics might be very helpful for us to put these things into focus. For instance, there was a survey that was done, to find out whether members of the public, how many members of the public had ever purchased counterfeit products, and more than 80% of those responded. They said that they had come across counterfeit products. In another situation, 64% of people who responded, and these are figures that were obtained from the carried out, from numbers from the UNB, Uganda National Bureau of Statistics, that 64% of people who responded, they said they had ever bought, a product that had expired. And majority of the people who were surveyed, they said about 90% of those felt like they were let down by the institution that were supposed to be protecting them. So the point I'm driving to here is that there is an inadequacy there, and it needs to be looked into, much more quicker and possibly much more broader, because these are things that really affect the health of the nation. You cannot have a situation like that where people are consuming fake products, whether for health purposes, whether for economic, whether for day-to-day, from foods to drinks to anything of any kind that you can think about, including medication. And you have a situation like that, and the powers that be do not seem to be concerned about that situation. I think for me, that's the highest level of negligence. In a few situations, I've read some cases where, cases have gone to court and they have been dismissed, on technical grounds, without the court, taking into account or being interested in going to the core issues that are being litigated, but very quick to dismiss cases, on technical grounds, which kind of gives the impression that there is some kind of connivance that has taken place behind the scenes, because a fully aware, well-informed judge would be able to look into these issues and not just accept defenses on legal technicalities. So there are issues there. Most of these things that are being done, actually, they are criminal issues. Actually, they are matters of criminal activity. I mean, in the clip that you showed us, Henry, there, in a way, you've got to give credit to the police, at least for moving in and doing what they are supposed to do. But that looks to be, it's the end of the story. The police will move in, maybe they'll carry out those arrests, in a public in a public fashion, and John, Tom, and Harry will be excited that something seems to be done. But that seems to be the end of the story. I think we need to go a little bit more than that, to drive the confidence in the consumers, in the general public, that when you go on the market to buy something, you're buying something that's legit. And when there are problems, there are proper avenues where you can be able to get those redresses from. And some of those redresses can be obtained from either the sellers, the manufacturers, the suppliers themselves, or if not, there has to be a serious kind of judicial kind of body where people can be able to take their complaints, and the complaints can be heard and resolved, in a serious fashion. And one of the things that I'm looking at in that area would be a specialist tribunal to be able to deal with those sorts of things. I'm not sure at this point in time that we do have a specialist tribunal that deals with consumer protection issues. When these matters do come up, they end up either in the high courts or in the mainstream courts. And sometimes the court is too much, demand. I mean, its time is too much encumbered by so many other complicating issues that this is not an issue of interest for them. So if we are able to put in place, a tribunal, a quasi kind of body that a quasi judicial body that can be able to deal with those sorts of things on their own, so that there is a clear, pathway through which where somebody feels that they have been done with in a manner that is not satisfactory, they can be able to take their complaint to an independent panel, and the matter will be resolved there and then. And of course, the issue of the penalties for people who engage in these sorts of things need to be addressed as well. I mean, if you're talking at products that where the seller or the manufacturer is capable of reaping in abnormal profits, and they know that if something goes wrong, the best that they're going to be fined for is 3,000 Ugandan shillings. Sometimes I'm not even sure whether that's actually forthcoming. What sort of incentive are you putting there, from a government policy perspective, but also from a judicial kind of perspective? What kind of incentive are you sending out? What kind of message are you sending out to people who are likely to engage in that kind of behavior in the future? So there is need, there is a case for these sorts of things to be taken very seriously, at that level. And I'm glad that we do have a panelist on the panel who is very central in those kind of challenges. And I do hope that those who are responsible for this kind of procedures and processes will be able to be interested in these matters, so that we can be able to move the matter forward in a meaningful manner.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitala. Mr. Chimera.
Yes, please.
Kathy is asking a question. Could we blame outside sources like China, who deliberately produce counterfeits? Now, I'm not sure if this is based on evidence, but it's a question posed to us. Is this a Ugandan problem, or is it an international problem? Stella earlier on referenced having different kinds of sones in one of the markets in Kampala. Is this a Ugandan problem, or should we look at it in an international perspective?
It is a twofold problem. There is a time when we were with the business community trying to address counterfeit issues, fake issues, and we met the Chinese commercial division in the embassy. And they gave us testimony that some of these products are not on the Chinese market. And they gave us examples that in China, when you are caught doing counterfeiting, you are sentenced to death. And there are cases, the company that was adding melamine substance to baby milk, the head of the Food and Drug Agency was executed, and the company head. But the other aspect, they told us, Ugandan traders go to China and order specific products that they bring into the country. And now the owners went back to the regulators who are supposed to inspect these goods. There is a pre-importation verification scheme where the products are supposed to be checked from source before they are exported or imported into the country. All of these schemes have had some success, and in others they have got challenges. And you find that continuously substandard, fake products and counterfeit products continuously come into the country. So the challenge goes back. It is not the citizens who are supposed to inspect and certify these products to enter the country. It is the competent authorities who are paid by taxpayers' money, who are certified to do that. Not every consumer is supposed to do that. A consumer is supposed to report when they see something bad. And unfortunately, when they report, their cases or complaints in a number of times are not addressed. So the problem is two-way. China might have a case to deal with, whereby if they get complaints from Ugandans, to go and look out to clean their market. But the challenge that we have is one, that it is the Chinese business says these are the orders by the business community in Uganda. So if, Council Julius, you order for a shirt with the I buttons not existing on your order, and the producer gives it to you, and you bring it into the market, and it is certified by the obligated inspector, will you blame the Chinese who produced for whoever ordered for that? And would you blame the consumer who complains and nothing is done? I will give you an example. One day we were in a TC looking at textile. A textile which is not cotton was labeled 100% cotton, but it is enhanced by enzymes to look like high quality cotton. And we wash that piece of textile and it shrinks, and it is synthetic material. Okay? And when they are declaring it, they say this is not cotton, but they sell it to the consumer as cotton. So the aspect to do with the China mix has got an element of our business community in the country. It has got the element of our inspectors in the country. And it has got an element of the duty bearer who is supposed to protect the consumers in this country. So consumers still are affected by the ineffectiveness or the wanting implementation. I'll give you an example. We nearly have standards in this country for everything to check the quality. Respective institutions have to use those standards to check. Let it be in agriculture, let it be in health, let it be in the electricity sector, let it be in the food sector, let it be in the service sector. We have got more than 1,000 standards in food related aspects, other standards in many codes of practice. The only thing that is failing this country is the human resource to implement and enforce those standards, the appropriators of the budget, the executive, to have the political will to make sure that Ugandans get quality. If Uganda was known to say no to poor quality, there won't be any import of poor quality stuff. And if there happens smuggling into this country poor quality stuff, then once one reports, the competent authorities would go in and get that stuff. We need the political will to save Ugandans from poor quality goods and services. National Bureau of Standards, National Drug Authority, NEMA, will not be effective in implementing environmental standards if the executive is not in business, if the judiciary is not in business. Now, if we look at who is raping the environment, where does it end up? It will end up by somebody either who is in the executive, somebody who is in the legislature, somebody who is in the regulatory, or somebody who is in business, godfathered by somebody who is somewhere. The common Ugandans are victims of abuse and failure to implement the policy framework that is in place.
Right.
You know, Henry, I just wanted to jump in there very quickly and add something very quickly in there, because one of the things that have sometimes been put forward is that you know, that consumers are not exactly aware of you know, the extent of these problems, and it is attributed to poverty and things like that. But I think what is concerning for me is that again and again you come across literature, you come across, you know, publications that seem to make the suggestion that traders, they prefer to import substandard goods, you know, because they think they can make a huge profit off that. For instance, I think there was an interview where the chairman of the Kampala City Traders Association was reported to have indicated that, you know, traders prefer to import substandard goods because they are inexpensive, and if they do import very expensive goods, then very few people will buy them, which then means that it becomes quite very difficult, you know, to fight these substandard products on the market if people are clamoring for them. And I think that kind of you know, perturbs me in that sense. But I think one of the challenges that possibly the prosecutors will be faced with is you know, the weak laws, the very weak laws, because even if you got somebody, you know, who, as I said earlier, if you got somebody who is engaged in this kind of dodgy practices, and the best you can get out of them is a fine of, say, 10,000 Ugandan shillings or 3,000 Ugandan shillings. I mean, if you weigh, you know, the scale of the profit that somebody is likely to make against the punishment that they are likely to face, maybe at a maximum of 12 months, you know, imprisonment as an alternative, I think it's just laughable. So I agree with what Henry says. There has to be the political will to make these laws really sting and drive the lesson, you know, that so that people can get to understand that, you know, issues that border on criminal activity cannot really be accepted. So I think that will be one of the areas, you know, where reform would really be necessary at this point in time.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I guess I'm going to call in the researcher, the educator, the creator, the politician. Is there a political will?
Right. I think that Mukulu Chimera put it very well. The gatekeepers of quality are going to be our leaders, right? And for me, as a politician in the opposition, right, it is my duty to constantly criticize this government and highlight when they've done well. And I think that in terms of political will, especially the will to do good, to give public good to Ugandans, I lost all hope in the current NRM regime. And I say that as a politician in the opposition. So no, there's no political will. And again, I want to reiterate that perhaps the best solution would be to override Yoweri Museveni and his NRMO. But before I do that, I think in terms of discussing reform, that, you know, Muzukulu wa Muswangali has taken us into a direction I think we must go, because we can't just complain all the time. And he was talking about reform in terms of legislature and reform in terms of enforcement, that those who enforce the law and implement the law must also have people checking on them. I quickly want to talk about evidence, because many times I was in court at Uganda Road. Uganda Road Court is one of the few courts that deal with counterfeits relating to the environment, but also trafficking of wildlife. And one of the most mysterious issues within the courts of law in Uganda is the disappearance of evidence, the disappearance of files, the disappearance even of material evidence that was confiscated by law enforcers. And so to follow from a response that Muzukuluwami Muswangali had in response to the clip we watched, where he celebrated the police for coming in and picking the cement, because he said police moved in. Yes, very good. Police confiscated the materials. Yes, very good. Now my experience as an ex-prisoner who had to go to court many times is that it is not good enough for the police to be seen to be confiscating materials, because there is a trade in counterfeits. And many times when materials are confiscated, they disappear. And because the court processes drag on for a very long time, before we know, the materials that were confiscated as evidence to be presented by police or investigators in court disappear. Disappear.
Back in the market, probably.
I think, yeah, perhaps they're back in the market, or they have been resold to the guilty party to redistribute. So there's that point. And so it's a whole economy of frauds. It's a whole economy of counterfeits. And while it is important for us to be critical and step aside from it and pretend we are clean, I think I come into this with very dirty hands, because in terms of material evidence disappearing in court, even if we have law enforcement people doing it, what do we then do after the evidence has disappeared? We perhaps go and buy. And I'll tell you why. Ugandans have been made so poor, that when we go to buy materials on the market, there's kind of parallel buying. They say to you, oyagala original or oyagala ka dupe? Okay, oyagala China, oba oyagala India, oba oyagala London, oba oyagala Japan. Okay? And then they say to you, oba oyagala made in Italy. And many times, because we are so poor, we buy the counterfeits. So while I am criticizing very strongly on one hand, my heart also beats very much like a Ugandan consumer who realizes that I don't have enough capital to purchase the originals. As a creator of knowledge, therefore, I want to say that our originals are often at a particular value, much more expensive, right? When these duplicates enter the market, they affect the mass-produced, they are cheaper. The value goes down, the quality goes down. So Stella Nyanzi, if you remain with your original things expensive, okay? And so what happens is that then I distribute to the distributors and say, do you want my originals? But also, can you make for me a connection with those who are duping me, so that I can also give them, and they'll have class B. So I have my class A, they have their class Z, but I can also produce a dupe with them. And so we are all corrupted. We are all corrupted. As Ugandans, we all need to rethink ourselves. Two last questions, two last issues. I think that there was an issue that Mukuru Chibera talked about. He mentioned pre-importation verification. And many times he talked about it is certified by, it is verified by. They are experts paid, qualified experts paid with taxes of Ugandans to do this duty. He mentioned NEMA and Hehe and Hehe and Hehe. My dear, certificates are duplicated in Uganda. Verification slips are duplicated inUganda. Holograms, you know watermarks and holograms. You see this thing that says University of Toronto on the side. Ugandans are so sophisticated. We can reproduce your handprints. What do they call it? The thumbprints.
Fingerprints.
Yes, fingerprints. Yeah. You can reproduce them in a passport and give it to you with a fake visa from America, where they have expert digital prints. That is how sophisticated this industry has become. And so when I talk about morality, and I talk about ethics, and I talk about personhood, we have to go back and look into ourselves. These are important questions on the abstract level, we can debate and discuss and even propose reforms. But I also think it's very moral, personal questions about us cleaning ourselves as a people. And I'll stop there. Although in terms of reforms, I wanted to say producers, distributors, private industry is important. We have talked about consumers because they have an activist in the place around. We've talked about legislation and judiciary and political will. I think that if we don't bring industry is important, industry, private producers, into the conversation, we are missing out. Because if somebody reported my product was duplicated, I have the seal of approval, I have the logo, I have the stamp. If I am left out of the conversation, you don't have the evidence to prove that these products you're bringing to court are fakes against my standards. So standards cannot be established without the compliance and goodwill and cooperation of producers of whatever it is. Thank you very much, Henry.
There is also the issue of funding for the consumer protection, networks, consumer protection, associations. That is something that needs to be looked into as well, because quite often they don't have the funds to be able to deploy themselves adequately to be able to run the advocacy campaigns that they would want to run effectively. Mr. Chimeda talked about raising awareness in the masses. How do you raise awareness with an empty budget? But of course, the people who are benefiting from these counterfeits, possibly people who are well connected, because obviously, as we know, those sorts of images that we saw, nobody is capable of engaging in a business of such a scale when they don't have enough capital, in the backyard, or they don't have enough support in whatever capacity you want to look at it, and be able to sustain it. A local man from Chikuba will never be able to do that. This is something that signifies that there is a wider network of crooks who are, trying to undermine the credibility of our systems. Stella talked about products, and I just want to share very quickly, and I'm at liberty to share this because I bought a product in Uganda myself. There is this phone, it's a mobile phone, it's called Techno. I think it's manufactured from China. I swear upon the Almighty God, when you put that phone on charge, the back of it goes hot, like a hot plate. Now, I want you to imagine if you are holding a phone in your hand and it's going off like it's a hot plate, and it costs a good 400,000 shillings or something like that, up to about $500,000. I bought this last year when I was in Uganda. I have it here, as my evidence. And you wonder, how do these products come onto the market? Who certifies them? Who checks them? These are the sort of dilemmas that people are faced with. And really, even though we can say that, we are creating awareness, we are doing this, but when there are no alternatives, sensible, safe alternatives on the market, and those who are responsible for enforcing this kind of things, they have deliberately decided to keep a blind eye on this kind of atrocities. I think that's, for me, is gross negligence, and maybe those people should reconsider their positions in whatever offices they are sitting in right now. So that is something I just want to put in that observation, just to be on the record.
Thank you so much for that observation. I can only imagine reading in the newspaper a lawyer, Ugandan UK lawyer, blown by Techno. Because he decided to buy a Techno instead of an iPhone or a Samsung. And when we talk about quality of culture, I think we need to evaluate not just the person in front of us, but ourselves.
But Henry, this is exactly what Henry said. That I might be aware of what a good product is, but by the time I go to the shop to buy a mobile phone or a watch or a shirt or whatever, by the time I pull my card out to want to pay for that, I should be able to have the trust that I'm buying the correct product. Now, the problem arises is that you buy the product, it's faulty. Where do you go to? Who do you report to? And what are the possibilities that you'll even get redress? Can I take that phone back to where I bought it and say to them that, look, your phone does ABCD. Can I have a refund? Can I have an exchange? Never. But those are the consumer rights we are talking about. For you to be able to have redress when things go wrong. Right. Certainly things will always go wrong. We've always heard about product recalls. In the country where I am, there's product recalls, fridges, televisions, cars, and all sorts of products. Even cereals, packets of cereals. If there's a problem with the product, it will be recalled. The organization which is responsible for enforcing those standards, once it has been alerted to a problem, they will step in and a product will be recalled off the market. What are the possibilities that something of such a kind can happen in our Ugandan situation? That is a question that needs to be thought about as well.
Mr. Chimela, as we wrap up this conversation, I know I thought we were going to discuss more than just this discussion, but this topic seems to be very broad, wide, and needed to be discussed upon. As we wrap up this discussion, what are your thoughts? Do you think this conversation matters, or are we wasting time? Lawmakers banawuliriza ne bagamba why ekintu kino katukitunulemu. Do we add value? Is there any value that we are adding to the Ugandan political discourse?
Muzukulu wa Mugema, I would say this topic we are discussing is a human right topic. It is about life, it is about health, it is about social, cultural, economic issues of human beings and consumers. The issue Stella has raised, the issue Julius you have raised, the issues that are in the chart have got only one answer. Like Julius, you have said that if I find something wrong on the market, a company is obligated to make recalls. What facilitated that? It is a quality culture in your country where you are, and it is facilitated by political will. When they say you have to enter our country with a visa, facilities will be put in place to check the visa, to check whatever is in coming into the country. Is it the consumer who puts that in place? No. It is the political will with a quality culture to have genuine people entering the country. It is the political will and the quality culture that cares about the citizens of the country that will put mechanisms, resources, human resource in place to check everything that is going to impact on the citizens. So to me, I will not blame China. I will not blame an ignorant consumer. I will put the blame on the duty bearer who has not facilitated the political will and invested adequate resources to have fully fledged institutions. I want you to mark my words, fully fledged institutions to work independently and autonomously. They need the political will. Emboozi eno tugenda ginyumya ekiro n'emisana okumala emyaka 10 kasita abakulembeze baffe batabeera na mutima okulaba nti bannansi babeera mu nsi yaabwe mirembe, obulamu bwabwe nga bwe buli, ng'era buli be bagula ne bakozesa nga bya mutindo. We are going to continuously be in a vicious circle. So the foundation of our discussion is very key. And I'm happy to read all the consumers listening in. This is consumer awareness. And this is an important subject. I always tell people that food is health care and medicine is Medicare. The foundation that makes you healthy is food. If it is of good quality, it will give you the immunity to fight whatever is bad. Now, the foundation for the health of consumers is a political will to look at the health, the welfare, the socio-economic well-being, and the survival and development of the citizens. And this is through institutions that are competent, well facilitated, and doing their obligations with professionals who are supposed to be serving the people, not to be serving by the appointers. So colleagues, however much we'll dilly-dallying and blame China, China will continue to dominate Africa, Uganda inclusive, if our leaders do not have the political will to protect us, defend us, respect our human rights as human beings. We are going to remain complaining. The discussion we are having is very key, very important, but it is going to be made right by continuously advocating wherever we are and look at the duty bearers having the political will to protect the citizens. Wherever you are, the duty bearers of the nations you are in are obligated to protect you, and they are protecting you. So it is the same that the duty bearers have signed conventions at the United Nations of social, culture, and economics. In 1985, Uganda is a signatory to the United Nations Consumer Protection Guidelines. Unfortunately, we continuously remind them of their obligations of signing such conventions and protocols. And unfortunately, we just shit on them. It is very unfortunate that a Ugandan who is a taxpayer, who is supposed to be protected by the taxes he or she pays, the people who are obligated to protect them get first-class service, but the person who is supposed to be protected gets zero services and quality goods. So the discussion we are holding, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, is a key discussion that even if we need to discuss it for 12 months, we need to discuss it because it touches you and me. It touches even the air we breathe. Consumer protection touches goods, services, the environment, the water, the air, and the right to live. So it is an everyday discussion. So, Muzukuru wa Mugema, if possible, discuss this for 12 months. I can share with you series where we need to discuss consumer protection. Let me give you an example. This is where we need political will. Digital platforms, digital economy is a right. It is no longer a privilege. Today in COVID, majority of people are ordering online. We are doing digital financial payment services. We are doing digital education. We have one most expensive digital access. People are doing digital health. People are doing nearly everything digital. We are in a lockdown. We need to be associating, socializing, but our socialization is very expensive. So this is how I'm showing you that the discussions that we are having here, si bya kunyumya muntu tunywa kikopo kya chai, kikwata ku bulamu bwaffe, ku busomyo bwaffe, ku mutima gwe musaayi gw'obulamu. This is the engine of life. If we think that this is a leisure fair, we are lying ourselves. We need to stop blaming other countries. We need either to blame ourselves that we have not invested right in our people. So this discussion is a human right discussion. It is guaranteed by the Constitution of Uganda. And the duty bearers are obligated to do good to Ugandans. Thank you very much.
Weyanza nnyo tweyanzege Mwami Kimera. Mwami Kimera olabika obeera mulangira. Oba weddira mpologoma. Simanyi.
Ndi wansenene ab'ensenene be baleeta erinnya Kimera okuyingira obulangira n'ab'empologoma. Singa oddayo emabega bakabaka beddira miziro gy'abaani. Kaakati kabaka omu yali yeddira nsenene erinnya ne liyingira. So bakimera bansenene wawu.
Okay. Tuyizeo lesoni ya Uganda nayo yiyemu. Mitala muzukulu wa Muswangali. Mateeka ki ge tugenda okulaba nti nno twenganga ensonga ya forgeries oba counterfeits oba ebintu ebikolerere second hand.
Before I get into my final remarks, I just want to very quickly quip in here, Henry, because somebody here made a claim that you are a biased Muganda. Your panel is always full of Baganda men and Baganda women.
Mr. Willab has been contributing to this conversation. Mr. Willab is not from Uganda.
But on a serious note, I think I just want to pose a couple of rhetoric questions here, so that in a reflective mood, so that as we go away from here and people who are listening to us as we wind up, these are things that maybe should intrigue the debates to move it forward, and as we think about what sorts of solutions we need to be implementing or thinking about to make our situations better. For instance, what should happen when goods are faulty? If you buy something that's faulty, what should happen? What should happen when digital content is faulty? Mr. Henry Kimera has raised a very important issue there, the issue of digital content, how services should match up to what has been agreed. If you agree that you are being provided ABCD, what should actually happen? How would you be able to match the quality of what you've actually got, from a shop or from a trader? And what should happen when they do not, all in any way, if the services are not provided at all, and you've paid for them? There are issues around unfair terms in contracts in terms of trading for businesses and organizations. What happens when a business is acting in a way that is unlawful or that is not competitive, for others to be able to engage in similar practice, And we also need to think about the greater flexibility for public enforcement, such as the National Bureau of Standards and other organizations to be able to respond to breaches in consumer law and consumer protection issues when they do arise. So those are things that would be areas of reform for me. But on top of that, I think the most important thing is for us to continue raising the awareness for our people, to tell them continuously and consistently that, you know, they have rights, and those rights they should be asking for those rights to be respected, and people who are responsible for providing those services should carefully think about protecting the rights of consumers. That's the only way we can get a healthy nation. Without those sorts of things, I think we shall continue to be here and shout our voices hoarse. I think that's the best I can say on that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mitala Muzukuru wa Muswangali. My name is Henry SSALI. This is the State of the Nation. I will not apologize for bringing qualified panelists based on their background, cultural background. So long as I continue to bring qualified people here to discuss issues, I am not going to apologize for that. Stella, now I'll go. Stella, Dr. Stella.
Katino nange kaneyanjula nze Nyanzi muzzukulu wa Kayiira neddira Mbogo ndi mukyala Muganda wawu gwe Kiruma agende yeetugire ku munyaanya si musango gwange nti nazaalibwa Muganda. But I want to appreciate very much the idea that we meet and we talk in response to your question of tunyumyamu oba tunyumyamu oba tukuba pokopoko oba tukola lugambo. I think what I appreciate about our panel is we are investing time in raising questions that must be asked and raised, and many times we are amplifying issues that are pertinent to Uganda, to the new Uganda. So are we wasting time? No. The Bible says my people perish for lack of understanding. That is scripture. And I am a person who is totally committed to creating knowledge, letting people know. Information is important. This topic, I think that the expert told us it's a matter of human rights. I think for me, it's a matter of life and death. As I conclude, I bought tires, wheels for my car, my Ipsum Toyota, my Wobus. From a place, they had a huge lorry full of all these tires. They looked brand new. They even had a brand name. I won't tell you which one. It was Italian. Okay. And I thought, wow, they're selling them very nice. So I bought 2 to change the front, not the back. And as we drove, after they had changed and given me a new replacement, the treads, you know, the treads that, yes, these things peel off. The first drive home, the retreading we discovered had been glued onto the tires. Now, to respond to your question of what do you do, where do you complain, I told my driver the following day, after 2 days, we drove back to the same spot to tell our supplier, hey, these tires nearly cost us our life. Imagine if they were faulty and we skidded off the road into other cars, I would be dead. So we went back to this place in downtown Kampala. The shop was still there. The sellers had never been there. Nobody even knew who they were. There was a new lot of faces selling tires. They all looked as new as the ones I bought from the Tata. But like they said, who 2 days ago, those people, we don't know them. Who? People come and sell these things and go away, okay? So how do you even get the culprit that you're going to report? Questions are important. We could talk about phones or medicine or what. In Uganda, it's the entirety of the products we have. And so we are not wasting time. I want to celebrate Mukulu Chimera once again. It is very good to be in the presence of knowledge, in the presence of experience, in the presence of voice and amplification. I have benefited a lot from the conversation. And Muzukuru wa Mugema, I now know who your judge is. Muzukuru wa Mugema, it's an honor to be on your panel. Please keep doing this. We need it. One day, I hope we have an archive of our critical responses, which we shall give to the new leaders of Uganda to listen to and reshape our new Uganda the way we've been planning it here. We are imagining a future of an ideal society. Thank you very much for the platform this week. If we are continuing, I want to say farewell to the audience because I'll be leaving shortly.
Yeah, so I thought we were going to discuss a lot of other things, but you're not going to be able to delve into the other conversation about MPs, the MPs bounty. I think we shall talk about that later on. But next weekend, I want to encourage every one of you guys to show up. The people who are following us, thank you so much for following us. But subscribe to YouTube, subscribe to okuleta information yeno jemuli sharing abantu abalala bonna bongere okumanya biki bitugerako. Next weekend we shall talk about land reforms. So I'm giving you the topic ahead of hand, whatever it is. Musobole okusoma ku bitabo ebiriwo ebitaliiwo mutegere nabyo. So next weekend we are talking about land. Mbagala nyo. My name is Henry SSALI. This is the state of the nation. Have a great Sunday.
This is the state of the nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry SSALI.